Um, I was going to ask you too. You got your podcast, right? Did you tell
Born
me
to
to?
Climb.
Did you tell me to schedule with you? I can't remember. I
It's a
thought.
weekly show.
Yeah. All
Born
right.
to
So
Climb. We're going to have you on there
yeah, I'll
for
jump
sure.
on. I'll jump on your schedule for that. It's a great way to open my podcast is telling everybody about your podcast, right? Um, so is where I'm at. Just real quickly, it is. I'm in Virginia, and it has been brutally cold. Did you see all the? As we're recording this, folks, it has snowed in the Panhandle of Florida. How's the weather where you guys are,
I
James?
saw that. It's been brutal. It's been brutally cold, just starting to warm up. 'Cause of course, I'm in Denver,
Yeah.
but it's January, and you know that just means time to grind and get her done.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. We got to folks for you don't know. James and I got to connect in just in a brief manner the other day, and I felt like we really got to know each other in a short amount of time. So I'm excited for our conversation to continue. But first, let me tell you who this guy is. On today's episode of the Second Chance podcast, we're joined by James Robbins, a leadership expert, business strategist, and best-selling author of 9 Minutes on Monday. James has spent over 20 years helping leaders overcome challenges, building thriving teams, and achieving sustainable growth. Today, he shares his personal story of resilience and lessons he learned from a pivotal second chance in his journey and actionable strategies to help you lead through adversity. I'm excited, man. How about that intro?
Love it.
I appreciate you, brother. I wanted to jump in right. Because we in our notes in our conversation we talk about the significant project failure and how that became this turning point in your career. Can you walk us through that to kind of kick us off, and then we'll just see where that takes us.
Well, that depends, Jeff, which failure of mine that we want to start with,
That's
because
right.
I just have a long list of them.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think I have failed more than most people.
Some folks told me I should have called it the Multiple Second Chance podcast with Jeff
For
Robertson.
sure. For sure. I mean, we can, I have, dang, I've got multiple, but I think for me, quick backstory, just for those listening, I was a preacher for a lot of years. And at the same time, I felt restless as a preacher. I'm very entrepreneurial. And eventually, what happened is I wanted to create a leadership consultancy company, which I ended up doing on the side at first. I was still a preacher. And then I ended up going through a divorce. And when you're a preacher and you go through divorce, it's just not good. It's very public. There's a lot of opinions, and even who you think to be your closest friends, they are so conflicted over it that a lot of people. It's just a very tough time. But that was a tough time for my entire family. But it was also the beginning of me looking deeper into life in a way that I never would have been able to without that. And I'm not going to say that when a marriage fails, well, I use the word fail because that wasn't the goal, right? The goal of every couple getting married was to stay married, and so if
Right.
they got divorced, so the fail is that you failed to reach the end. But that doesn't mean that the marriage itself was a failure. Um, Maybe a failed marriage is someone who's married for 50 years, but unhappy the entire time.
Great point.
So, anyways, that was a time of really deep reflection and me beginning to learn about myself in a way that I didn't know before. And all of that then affects your business, your leadership, right? Because you take a look at, oh, what got me here? And you uncover those patterns, and then you're faced with a choice. Am I going to change, or am I going to stay the same person?
What? So where are you at in life, age wise? Or was this young James coming up through the ranks when you experience this? Is this seasoned James who's got some years under his belt, or where are you at in life during this time?
This was not young James. I was married 25 years. So I was probably 48 at the time. I think
Yeah,
this is 7 years ago now.
yeah,
So yeah, in some ways it still feels recent, but in other ways, man, a lot of life has happened in 7 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, so you lean into that. So that's a huge turning point, folks. So questions I have to just for clarity for myself and everyone else. Have you moved into you're still preaching and you got your leadership company part time at this point in time, right?
What had happened was my leadership company grew to the point where I was making more money on the side doing that than working as a preacher full time.
Yeah.
And at that point, I said, "Okay, hey, it's time for me to step out." But what I did was, I I I resigned my salary, and we hired another guy to take over for me. But I still stayed in the leadership team, and so people still saw me as really the head preacher. I would still preach,
Yeah.
even though I wasn't on the payroll. And then that's when all that went down.
Do you there is all sorts of resilience that's built into this moment, James. Like you are in high regard, you're a preacher. Glass house does not describe what you have to live in. You're buying you have to everything, all eyes is on James, but you have to make a decision as you're preaching divorce and all the uncertainty and all the drama that comes in with your situation, right? But you had to make a decision at some point in time of what may have been right for you or what may have been right. I don't like in my life sometimes I'm thinking, like I tell a lot of people now, oh, Jeff did a lot of things until kids came on. Then it was like, like I have to move in. I have to process a couple people who depend on me with decisions that I make. What is I want to speak to that person who's like, and it may you're not. We're probably going to speak to very few preachers that may be on the fence of where you were, right? But I'm just talking about that person who's in a bad situation that knows that life's maybe speaking to them or whatever, and that they need to get out of this. And you have every reason to stay in it because of just what you were called to do for that long time. And by the book, everybody would say that you should have stayed in it, James. And that's where my curiosity is the power, the mindset shift, whatever it took for you to say, no, I'm moving on. I'm going to divorce. I'm going to exit. Tell me about that, James, and those decisions.
Yeah, that was a distinct moment. So what happened was we've been having problems for a while, but trying to work it out, trying to work it out. And my now ex, which we're still very close, we're good friends, she had said to me, I was going to go visit my son. He was playing hockey up in Canada, junior hockey, and I was going to go see him for the weekend. And she said, "Hey, I think you need to get honest with yourself about what you really want. And when you go up to Canada, why don't you do that?" And at the time I was like, no, I want this to work and everything. But I went up to Canada. I watched him play one of his games, and then I had like a half a day on my own. So I drove out into the wilderness and I just went hiking, and it was fall. All the leaves were turning, and I felt such great pressure, such great turmoil. And I asked myself one question, but I prefaced it with, if you can just be totally honest, as ugly as the answer might be, but if you can be totally honest, what do you want? What do you want to do? And the first answer that came out of my mouth was, I don't want to stay in this situation.
Yeah.
And then I just gave my permission. I gave myself permission to be honest, because the answer to me was meant so much pain, right, for so many, and obviously for my family. But it was at that point where I thought, okay, what do you need to do? And I think for anyone listening who's going through a tough time, or whether it's relationship, whether it's a job, you have to get to those moments where you can be completely honest, but give yourself the grace of whatever comes out of your mouth. And whatever comes out of your mouth doesn't even mean that's right or that that's best. But if you can't at least lay all the cards on the table, like for me, when I was thinking through all my options, it's like laying cards on the table, except that one, not going to lay that one down. But I had to lay that down and realize, yeah, maybe this is what I need to do. But it was a moment of, can you just be honest with yourself and don't judge it? What do you want? And then, once I made that decision, I put the blinders on and, okay, this is what I'm doing.
It's I wrote down you found clarity in private, surrounded by nature. Right? It's you found some, and you took it as far. And folks that are watching this, if you'll look behind James, you'll see his mountains and his love for nature and all the things there. And that, when I was thinking about us the other day, and then as you were talking there, that time alone is you get influences, but that time alone, man, really helped you. And maybe those moments, like in nature, really helped you just get to where you need it to be. Um, I don't think any decision's ever the wrong decision, right? I don't. I think it's you just make the decision and you keep making it till you feel like that you're heading somewhere. How does this affect James the leader? How does this affect your company, your leadership company? We know how it affects the church. You could maybe quit pastoring at that church. Maybe you could answer that for me because I think you told me that. But I want to make sure it comes out in this conversation, not the last one. Um, so, what happens at the church, and then how does this affect your situation as you're right here, right now? How does it affect the church, and how does it affect your leadership company?
Yeah, these are great questions. When you are working in ministry, it's just one of those rare jobs where if you get divorced, you're not gonna. It's career ending. And I mean, I guess the other career would be like if you're a marriage therapist and you get divorced, it's career ending. Although, what's two of the big relationship advice people used to be married to each other and got divorced. So maybe it doesn't matter there. I think, at least in my setting, because we all are programmed with different beliefs, right? We're programmed with that. And because I had gone into marriage with, I really just thought I'll never get divorced. Like that was never on the radar. And then to go there was there was a lot of shame for me to digest. And when you feel shame about things or you feel guilty, you feel like you've fallen short, I mean, it just oozes into other areas of your life. So, of course, professionally, I'm going to speak at some conference and I've done it long enough. I'm able to put that in a box for 75 minutes while I get on stage with 1,000 people. But I would be lying if I said it didn't impact a bit my confidence. And this is going to sound weird, but there were so many places in my keynote where I had just jokes or laugh points drilled in, and they had to do with being married. And the first time I went to tell them again, I literally was like, do I tell this again or do I now change the story and say it's my ex? And then I was so weird. Like that was, I don't say weird, that's being hard on myself, but yeah, it spilled over into that part of my life. And it just took me a while. I think anyone who's gone through a divorce, you understand it just takes a while to come back on the other side and process all the different beliefs and expectations you had on yourself and get to a healthy place.
It's when you live a certain way for so long and you tell a speech for so long, it's the uncertainty in that as well. It's you've got the clarity, but it's the uncertainty of uncomfortableness. Like you said, you knew where you were supposed to be, but it's something new, and it's this feels different or what have you. So I understand what you're saying. I teed all that up, kind of, man, because. There's a lot of that story, right? There's a lot of that story that continues to develop and continues to nudge you. Where does your book fall in here? 9 minutes on Monday. Is your book pre this situation, or is it post, or how does it fall into to where we at in the story?
Yeah, 9 minutes on Monday is pre. My book coming out is post. But back to 9 minutes on Monday. 9 minutes on Monday is a leadership framework. And one of the things when you're working in a not-for-profit setting, and for anybody who's a leader here who is in not-for-profit, you understand this, it's really like the greatest school of leadership because you are motivating people. You often have to motivate volunteers So let's say let's go into ministry for a moment. You've got a paid staff. So, those people are on the payroll, but then you've got this other group that's 10 times bigger that is, you can't pay them. You can't fire them.
Right.
You can't kick them out, like unless they've really done something egregious. Right. And you've got to get this whole family, so to speak, working together. And there's relationship challenges. And so and actually I had lunch with John Maxwell once, and I asked him this same question. I said, do you find that it's harder to lead in a not-for-profit setting and then in the corporate setting? And he said, oh, absolutely, 100%. Because that same idea, right? Like so where it's good in training is you begin to learn that influence, right? Like how to influence people. So where my book came out of, because for me, I like frameworks, I like models, and leadership is such a nebulous thing, right? Like it's, where are the edges? There's a certain art to it, but I like frameworks, and there are certain things we know from research that motivate people. One of them being if their boss cares about them, and the research on this is so clear. But for those of you who are leaders or business owners, if you care about your staff, and not if you think you care, but if they feel that you care about them, they are going to trust you more, and they're going to work harder for you because of this psychological principle called reciprocity. Yeah. It's the same thing. Like if I came to your city, Jeff, and bought you lunch, I know what you're going to tell me. You're going to tell me, okay, well, you can buy me lunch only if I can buy it next time. It's just, it's how it works, right? So when you care about your staff, and when I mean care about your staff, you don't have to be your friends with your staff, but being genuinely interested in them as people, knowing if they got kids, what their kids' names are, if they're married, what their spouse's name is, knowing what's a passion of theirs outside of work, what's their career goals, what's their corporate anniversary or corporate birthday, so you can recognize that. Just little things like that, so that from time to time, you can just be interested, because it communicates the message to somebody. You matter. And so that's, one of the, in the framework called 9 Minutes on Monday, the book is built around 9 drivers of engagement, 9 engagement drivers. So one of them is that care, right? People have a need to be more than a number. Excuse me. They also have a need to wrestle with something. As I like to say, people need a mountain to climb. And so a lot of people get in the workforce today and they're just completing tasks. And then it's like being on a treadmill. You burn up all this energy and then you get off it and you haven't gone anywhere. People want to feel like the effort they're putting in, they're getting someplace with it. And that's why one of our goals as leaders is we have to create targets and goals for people, or at least help them create them, so that people can be striving for something. So for any of you who are listening right now and you have employees, you have to ask, could you go give them feedback on their progress right now? And if that's a tough question for you to answer, then it means there's nothing they're striving for to get progress on, right? So remember, everyone needs a mountain to climb and a reason to climb it, right? To connect purpose to pay. They need a reason to climb it, and they need enough rope to hang themselves along the way. They need some freedom. They need some autonomy, not to be micromanaged. But if you just remember those 4 things I told you: care about your staff, give them a mountain to climb, reason to climb it, enough rope to hang themselves along the way, man, that's going to increase their motivation.
I use perfect thing for the personnel side. I use Fords. Are you familiar with the Fords acronym in customer service? So it's keys to getting to know a customer for life. And what you just said, when you talk about your staff, well, I deployed the same stuff. Keys to making having a customer for life: family, get to know their family, get to know their occupation, recreation, what they do for fun, and dreams. If you can layer in those 4 things, and like at the gym, we would hold the door. How are you doing? Hey, where do you work at? Right. So we would taught the staff, how we could layer in, and then I teach that now, and just operational type stuff, and similar a workshop or within a company that's just they want to get more, they want to do more for their people, they want to dial in. So it's a really easy customer service focused message that you can put out there. And I'll challenge them, hey, take 60 days, 90 days, whatever, put a timeline on this and have a little competition of who can have a Google Sheet. Some people use their CMRs. At the gym, we had it built into the CMR. So you had your forward. So you could, if you called into the gym, James, and you're like, I was telling my wife Beth the other day, I'm going to Forwards family, wife Beth. And I was it created these active listening moments as well. So that's a really good nugget that you can apply as a leader with your as a lead with your subs and with your team and with your staff. Is using that same thing of because they have dreams, they got stuff they want to do for fun. They just don't come to work to work all the time. James, I was going to ask you: was the book born out of your passion to teach leadership, or was it born out of a situation that you may have experienced?
That was born more out of a passion to teach leadership. I
Yeah, cool.
think I'm someone who's always wrestling with how do I teach this in a way that is clear. And the more I studied intrinsic motivation and motivation, that's when I began to see, these are the things that drive engagement. And the more they became clear to me, it just became a framework. Where 9 Minutes on Monday has been popular is that it teaches people these 9 engagement drivers, but then it gives them this simple ritual to use on Monday morning to increase the motivation of their staff. And the ritual, it's embarrassingly simple, yet profoundly effective. And basically, it just involves 9 questions that when you get into the office, before you get into your email, before you get into your to-do list, you're going to pull out this little piece of paper. We give them a template, and you're going to ask yourself 9 questions. And each question is going to give you a little micro commitment. Who am I going to connect with this week, right? Who am I going to give some recognition to? Who am I going to help grow? It's little things like that, and you get that in first.
We things that we often overlook, right? Just it's we get better in our inefficiencies sometimes of creating these small conversations. What do you tell those leaders that are struggling in this area or navigating challenges similar to ones that you have faced? What is kind of that message that you like to put out there for leaders that are stumbling their way through leadership?
Yeah, it really depends on, I guess, where they are at in the stage. So let's say somebody is new to leadership and they just feel a bit overwhelmed, not sure how do I motivate people. Then I'm just going to tell them, listen, care about your staff and then be clear on what needs to happen. And, obviously there's some skills that you need to grow in as a leader. Like you've got to be able to hold people accountable. You got to be able to communicate clearly. And those things you grow in over time. I think the biggest thing that holds people back, though, as leaders is not skill. It's these internal beliefs that hold them back. For me early on, it was I wanted to be liked as a leader, so I didn't challenge my people. And I would think also along with that was a bit of the imposter syndrome. I spent a lot of my career really thinking, if people only knew, I should not be in this position, even though I was actually doing well and putting out results and, usually in the upper third, compared to my peers. But the whole time I was just always doubting myself. And, you know, in a lot of ways, what I've learned is no one can completely fix that but yourself.
Yeah.
Like people can tell you all day, hey, you got this, you're great. But until you believe it, people can say that to you your entire life. And at some point, it's a little bit like I used to tell people when they would be thinking of if they wanted to join church or not, and they would be struggling with their belief, right? And at some point, there's going to be a decision on anything to do with faith, whether that's faith in a higher being, faith in yourself. Like how much evidence do you need? Regardless of how much evidence somebody gives you right now, tomorrow you're going to be in a new situation you haven't been in and that you have no evidence. So where do you put your confidence? At the end of the day, it's got to come back into you, right? That, hey, I'll figure it out. I may not do it perfectly, but look at the things I've done in the past. And I've just got to believe in me. And so, honestly, a mantra for me still to this day is I believe in me.
Yeah.
And not a month goes by where I don't have to have one moment where I have to ground myself in that. I might be facing something, or a client wants me to do something that maybe I've not quite done yet.
Yeah.
And then I'll think, oh, I believe in me. I'll make it work. But I wasn't always like that. Before, I would have been stressed, worried about the project. Then I'd do a great job, and then at the end, I'd be so relieved, almost like I just escaped with my life, and then I'd be exhausted. And that was the cycle.
Where'd that come from? Where did that version of James come from? Something version I know.
That's my little life for sure. Yeah, growing up, small town kid, farm kid, redheaded, freckle face introvert. A lot of programming happens in your early life.
Yeah.
And, in certain domains, I wasn't like that, but in other domains I was. This is another reason why I think leadership is so wonderful, and entrepreneurship even better for those of you who are entrepreneurs, because it challenges you. Like when I started my company, no one told me I was going into sales, because I hate sales, because sales is rejection. And that was one of my biggest things, right? I don't want to be rejected. And even still to this day, I have to, okay, I got to call this guy again. And, I got to fight that. Yeah, but you've called him 3 times this month. And, but then, someone will sign up for a workshop, and then they'll email me, hey, thank you so much for following up with me so many times.
You're at, we carry over those things, and it creates imposter syndrome. It creates just those moments of self-doubt, because you can't be told that you're X for so much long before you start to kind of buy into it. And especially if you don't find immediate success story, you can be like, aha, and look at me now. And when you're walking through some more struggles, you're like, crap, was they right? So it plays in there. What do you think were some key turning points from young James, to talk to those young leaders that are coming up that aren't 50 and 56 or so, that are working their way through the pipeline, that are dealing with that, James, because I've been there, right? When I first got into teaching and workshops, I could do government, because I came out of public safety and law enforcement. Knew my thing, all the stuff. I could go up and present. Everybody was kind of used to me, and it was a level of comfort for me. And I tell you this, because here's what happens. I go back to teach marketing. My first marketing seminar that I did, one person showed up. I mean, it was like crap. And then the next one I go in front of, I was brought in to speak, and there's 40, 50 people in the room. And I remember riding home, and my wife, I called her and shit. I was like, hey, I'm done. I'm on the way home. You need anything? She's like, no, I'm good. How'd it go? And I was like, I absolutely killed it, but they think I was a freaking ignorant hick, right? And I just started going down my negative self-talk. I'm like, yeah, they're sitting back there probably laughing right now because whatever. And then finally, I just kept working through those moments, dude. And finally I got to where I was like, you know what? That's not. And I found the right people, found folks like yourself that build me up, that told me more of what, of all the things and books, all the stuff that I went through. That's a lift, dude. So, all right. So I rambled on just to ask you, how did young James overcome that?
Well, I first want to just comment on what you said. I think that's so amazing that you just kept doing it, and as you did it, you reached out, you found different things like people, and you learned things, and I think that's the path. I don't know that there's just one thing that flips the switch. There's going to be a lot of different things, but to answer your question, to go back and talk to young James is the same message I'm now saying to leaders everywhere I go. Even companies, when they'll have me come in and they'll say, like, we're trying to create a high performance culture, and yeah, of course we're going to talk about leadership, psychological safety, but I say the foundation is when every single employee can adopt a growth mindset. And, for those of you, many of you are familiar with Carol Dweck's work, but even what precedes her work is the idea of mental toughness. And the model of mental toughness is very much around growth mindset. It's this idea that you don't have to be perfect, number one, but what you do have to do is grow. And so the idea, and this is what I would say to young James, I would say, stop trying to prove yourself and start focus on getting better. And everything you do is just feedback and lessons. And you've got to disconnect from your ego. So when you see a challenge, run towards it. This is an opportunity. And to give you examples, early on, I was deathly afraid of speaking in public, and so I just began to avoid it. Well, that's an ego mindset. Like, I don't want to do something that then I fail. And how many people in my life as well, how many things did I not do because I was afraid of how I would look if I failed? And, afraid of what? Those people aren't even going to show up to my funeral one day. So why would I care what they thought of me? But yet I did. So the growth mindset is the best thing because it gives you that excitement of, I'm just going to go do this. I might totally blow it. I might do amazing, but regardless of the outcome, I will learn, and that's going to make me better. And I'll give you an example of this. This is where I diverge a little bit from Carol Dweck's work, because she's very much like, you're a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. Well, to me, that's kind of a fixed mindset in itself. Like, I don't think it's that binary. I think there's times I can step into a growth mindset, and there's times I'm back at a fixed mindset. So maybe a year ago, I was reading this book and I found out that there's a storytelling competition. It's all over the North America. I never knew it existed. And there's one in Denver. And so I looked it up, and it turned out like the next storytelling competition was like in 2 weeks. And how it works is you just go and you put your name in a hat. And if they draw out your name, you have to get up and tell a story for 5 minutes. And then you get judged by a panel. And they'll have 10 people go during the night. So I'm like, well, this sounds fun. I mean, I've been on stage almost 3,000 times, and I'm known as a storyteller. I'm like, well, why don't I do it? So I go down there and I walk into this. I thought it was like going to be a community center with 15 people. It's an auditorium with a balcony, and it's packed. And I get there and I go down front, and I was actually late. And I said, is it too late to put my name in? They're like, no, go ahead. And I put my name in. And keep in mind, I've never even seen this. Like, I didn't even watch a YouTube video before I went. I don't even know what this is. So there was this wrestling match within me. Part of me was like, dude, you should have just came tonight and watched, right? But that's the fixed mindset. The growth mindset, I did the right thing. I put my name in, but I went and I found my seat up in the balcony. I brought my daughter with me, and I sat down beside her. And then I said, you ever do something and right away you think, oh, that was a mistake? And she laughed. And then I said, well, as long as I don't get picked first, because I want to at least see one person do it. And then no sooner had I said that, they're like, our first storyteller of the night, James Robbins. And I was like, no.
Must be two of us. Must be two of us.
I wonder if he's here.
I wonder if he's here.
So
sounds like a nice
I walked
guy.
down there and I go tell a story, and I should know better. I try to tell too big a story, so I go over time. That's the first thing. They give you a secret word. I forgot to use that. And anyways, at the end of the night, or the good thing is, when I got done, I was in first place. And until the second guy went, and then I started to fall down the ladder. Well, at the end of the night, I ended up in 6th place out of 10 at a local storytelling competition. And I know there's no one in that building who's been on stage more than me, right? So my ego was bruised when I walked out of there. I was driving out with my girlfriend.
Your daughter's like, Dad, what's up? Oh, come on.
Exactly. Like all
You
these
do
other
this for a living. I hear my daughter busting my chops now.
half of them, I was like, that story's not better than mine, but the judges thought so. So anyways, I had this moment where my ego was bruised. But then I said to my girlfriend, I said, it's actually kind of funny. I'm probably the most experienced guy there. And I just got wiped out in a local storytelling competition. And she laughed and she said, yes, that is funny. And, but then the growth mindset steps into, okay, well, what did I learn from that? Like, it's funny. Here's the thing. I tell this story now when I'm doing presentations. And the fact that I got sixth place in this storytelling competition is a better story
Yeah.
than had I gone and I won the competition. So back to the question about what would I say to younger James is that a lot of what is going to inspire people about your life isn't about what you accomplish, but it's the journey. It's your perseverance. It's how you get back up after a failure. It's your mindset. It's your attitude because everyone fails, everyone falls short, and everyone needs models and examples to look to in those moments. Like how many people are inspired by the person who just is a rock star and never makes a mistake?
Yeah.
It inspires us to some degree. We can aspire to be like that person, but it's also a bit out of touch.
A lot
So,
of people
anyways, I
don't
would say to
acknowledge it
younger
too,
James,
James, right? A lot of people, the mistake, like I used to make big deals out of small mistakes, and people would be like, they, they wouldn't even give it attention, right? They would just move on. So sometimes just not acknowledging these little things that people put so much emphasis on is too, right?
for sure. But I will say this about imposter syndrome. Where imposter syndrome served me was because I didn't want to look stupid.
Mm.
I I really focused on learning my craft and I put a lot of time into it. And so, I'm kind of conflicted about what's the moral of that story. I mean, ultimately what's best is you're going to be a great student and you're going to learn and master skills. You don't have to do that from a place of fear, but in the end, that's what drove me initially. I just didn't want to look bad. Now, obviously, when I go into, I'm going to do my next presentation, I think it's on the East Coast in March. Of course, I don't want to look stupid, but I know I won't because I have good stuff to teach and
Yeah.
I know how to present it. So I have the years, to rest on. But I think one thing that I started a few years ago, Jeff, and that was I stopped preparing so much. And I've just all my life I've over prepared. And so I remember the first day I did it, I had to go in and speak to a hospital. And normally I would like still be nervous the night before and like go over the notes too much. And I said, no, not doing it. I'm just walking in the room and I'm going with myself. And, was it as smooth and polished? Probably not, but yet maybe that doesn't mean it was worse. And I did just fine. So it's trust yourself. You don't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
Just do it. Keep learning and keep doing it, but take risks.
The only thing I put a lot of emphasis on now is if I'm using someone else's technology. Those have made me I can shoot from the cuff on about it. You can like the impromptu stuff. I enjoy doing that. I did some stand up comedy. That's a lot of fun because you just kind of like I had some stuff, but then here's where your uncertainty is. You're like when you go teach, you got your product. They're gonna, they're hiring you to be there. When you go do an inspirational talk, you're generally, being asked at something. Comedy, you put your name in the hat and you go up. And look, you got to wait for them to laugh. If you're trying to be funny, especially some guys will do it. Don't worry about being funny. I wanted some laughs, and man, once I got that first laugh, it was like the most liberating thing. I'm like I've made it on my comedy tour now. Um, you that's just a lot of uncomfortable stuff. And but my technology will always, if I don't go in and just like, hey, walk around the room, just have some room presence. But I never worry about the material because I feel like I'm a craftsman of that stuff now, and I'm confident in what I do, and I'm no longer that. That when that negative guy shows up, I'm like, yeah, man, there's room for you in the corner. You got to go sit over there. I got other things to do.
Yeah, I used to uh, I used to scan the audience for who wasn't into my presentation, who was sleeping, who was
Yeah.
and just that's just driven by insecurity. And that was early on. Now I don't think like that, but for sure.
You, I want to thank you, man. I want to ask you, and it plays a big role in leadership and all those things you went through. And the question that's kind of on my mind here is James made a hard decision out there in nature in the woods that day and set himself on path. And we're probably I'm going to make a lot of assumptions here, or a few. And your congregation probably judged you in some way, shape, or form, but you come out of this faith that's deeply rooted in forgiveness. And I feel like somewhere along the lines, all those folks probably they probably said, you know what, we're gonna forgive him. There might be one or two that are still like, but that's okay. Where did you find the last thing I wanted to know from you, James, is, and I want to speak to that person who's struggling. Where did you find the power to forgive yourself in that situation where you're divorcing and as the preacher in your church? Where did you find that moment, or did you find that ability just to forgive yourself and move on as well?
I wrestled with that for a long time because I was so like, at the end of the day, I made the decision. And there were three things that helped me. One was I had a close friend who, when everything started, he came to me, and he had been through a divorce as well. And he was an elder in the church. And he, in a sense, paved the way. He went through a lot of tough time. He came to me and he said, I will be your divorce coach and help guide you through this time. He was very blunt about it. And he stayed in my life during that time to give me perspective. He was pointing me like, forward. So that was helpful. The second part was I went to, some churches, they have these like divorce care things. And that was like shame in itself for me to
Yeah.
attend that. But I was like, I got to do this. And just going there and being able to tell my story and what I was wrestling with, even though nobody had like an answer for me, like in those moments, I was looking for permission. I was looking for someone to tell me you did the right thing. But it was one of those things where nobody wants to tell you whether you did the right thing or the wrong thing. Even if they felt like you did the right thing, they just don't want that on their resume. And I also went and I saw this therapist for a while, and she was talking about forgiveness. But she noticed some things I'd said, and she goes, I think you haven't forgiven, that person. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I think I have. But I remember I had this profound moment, and this is in my new book that's coming out, where, the heart is not meant to be a prison. And yet, when we don't forgive people, it's like we have these little jail cells down there, and we have all these people stuck in them. And but the problem is the heart's not meant to be a prison. And so, they bang their cups on the walls, and we get triggered from time to time. And I realized I got to let everyone out of there. And I went on this walk one day, and person after person, I just thought about who they were. And then I was just like, all right, I'm letting you out. You don't owe me anything. And I just went through person after person. Well, eventually, um, I got to myself, and I realized, oh, I've locked myself down there. And I said, okay, are you going to let yourself out? And that was a hard moment. That was
Yeah.
an emotional moment, but
Yeah.
it was very freeing. And yeah,
Um, New book will be out when?
August 5th.
August 5th. What's the title of that one?
The title is The Call to Climb.
Call to
And it's
Class.
all about, in a sense, it's about disappearing for a few weeks and realigning your life
Yeah.
with your soul. And that's not from a religious perspective, but just your inner life, getting it back on track. And the book's in the story form, but that's what it's about.
Um, your leadership and coaching. How can folks get in touch with you?
Thanks for asking that. They can go to jamesrobbins.com. I'm easy to find online. James Robbins, two B's and Robbins. And of course, they can find out about us, our courses, our programs. Come see the podcast. We're going to have Jeff on there
Yeah,
soon. You'll be able to
please.
watch that.
Excited. Um, there's a lot wrapped in there, man. And there's that's I'll tell you this, folks, is and you'll hear me say, like, never take advice from a man who's never really walked the path and in those shoes, especially when you're gonna pay them good money to come in and change you. The stuff you just heard today is absolutely James is someone who's been there. He's done that. He's lived life, and he's not a perfect man by no means, but he's had to make some really hard decisions in just your life, and that's what I was excited to get to know about you. That's our second chance story, right? And the fact that the a couple of my conversations this week and in the past is we talk like we get to this how you forgave yourself, and man, it is a moment. Especially for dudes, right? Because you're like, oh yeah, I just put that crap behind me, moved on. No. It was a hard conversation. It was a lot of reflection, and that, folks, if you take nothing away, you know someone out there that's struggling, that's probably on their way to being a dang good leader themselves, this is a great episode to share with them. And James and I would definitely appreciate that. Can't thank you enough, brother. Appreciate you being on here. Can't wait to have you back on. We'll do some more conversations about all the cool stuff you get to do, and I'm excited to come on your show and just tell you all the reckless behaviors that old Jeff got to do. So, thanks for being on, man.
For sure, brother. Really great to connect. Thank you for having me on the show.
Appreciate you.